Welcome back to another edition of the Saturday to Sunday Football Podcast. I am Paul Perdichizzi, and thank you for joining me as always. The Shrine Bowl and Senior Bowl is in the books. The first part of the pre-draft process is complete. We turn our attention to the combine in early March and then the pro days leading into April before we get to the 2025 NFL draft. Here at Saturday, Sunday, we really start to kick it into high gear in the pre-draft months. Hopefully you followed along a little bit on Twitter during the Shrine Bowl or during the Senior Bowl. I was sharing my thoughts throughout those games, live tweeting my thoughts on the prospects, some tidbits on what I thought about their practice film from the week. And it just take me a couple days to get to the podcast. We've been battling the flu. You probably hear it in my voice. I don't have a lot of voice right now. So, pardon me for that. But I was trying to, get a little bit of my voice back so I could record the podcast here, to share my thoughts on the week that was in Mobile, the Shrine Bowl, and kind of start to set the stage now for the next part of the pre-draft process, which is, like I said, the NFL Combine in about 3.5 weeks or so. So let's get right into it, talking about the Senior Bowl. I've watched the practice film that's been available, ESPN, NFL, the recap shows, everything that was posted on Twitter. I watched the game. So listen, it's just one part of the evaluation process. And can it send you back to the film? Yes. Should you make drastic changes in rankings from a Senior Bowl week? Absolutely not. But it is a part of the puzzle, just like the combine's part of the puzzle, that everything matters, right? Everything matters. Everything moves the needle. It distinguishes between tiers. It sends you back to the film. It helps you sort certain things. And I think this is just, as usual, part of the evaluation process. So I think it does have merit, just like the combine, I think, has merit, and everything has merit. So let's get right into it. Let's start with the quarterback position. Definitely a decent amount to discuss there. Overall, I'll say I don't think it was a strong week for the quarterbacks in Mobile. I don't think anybody really dramatically seized the moment like we've seen in the past, whether it was Baker Mayfield or it was Josh Allen. So if we kind of go through the guys, I would say the guy that probably helped himself the most in terms of the opinion of the media that was down there was Jackson Dart. When I watched the film from the week, I didn't see anything about Dart that made me change my stance on Jackson Dart. I know he has his backers and people who really think highly of him. And the buzz is that there's a real chance he's QB3. There's a real chance that he's a round 1 pick. There's a real chance that for some people he's their QB2. I'm not there. I'm not even close to there. What I saw from Dart this week was you see that athleticism to move around. You see, I would say good arm talent. He can make every throw. I still have my questions about Jackson Dart were how does he translate to the next level, right? The scheme at Ole Miss made things very advantageous for him. He didn't have to do a lot of post-snap reading. So none of that was really answered this week. When I watched him play this week, I thought he came across as who he was. So for me, it was stock neutral. I think he's a round 2 prospect. Other people think he's greater than that. But I will say, I think the consensus was that it was a stock up for him. I don't know if that was just people getting around to his film. I don't know if that's just people who want to believe there's another guy who warrants going in the first round. So I think my own personal take would be stock neutral on Jackson Dart. I think the consensus out there would have been stock up on Jackson Dart in terms of draft stock, draft capital, where we sit right now. The other big name there was obviously Jalen Milroe. From what I saw and from what the consensus was, I would say it's stock down in terms of still accuracy and ball placement concerns in the short to intermediate. I did think by the third practice, he looked a little bit better than the first 2 practices, but there was a lot of inconsistency kind of matching what we saw this week. So again, I think the narrative out there is that it was a really poor week for Jalen Milroe, but I think you can make the cases nothing that we saw this week was not what was on his film. So I think people are going to sell it as, stock down. I'll even say I was hoping to see a little bit more consistency in terms of the ball placement and the accuracy in a setting like this. We didn't really see it. So I would say stock down for Jalen Milroe, but I still think there's a real possibility a team falls in love with the traits because he does have calling cards. He does have elite athleticism, elite speed for a quarterback, that game-breaking type player. So if one coach, one coordinator, one team believes in him and thinks they can get it out of him and develop him and say we can do for him what the Eagles did for Jalen Hurts or what the Bills did for Josh Allen, and they don't see a guy who might struggle to make the transition and develop like Justin Fields has so far, Anthony Richardson has so far, I think you're still going to see a team late round 1 to the first half of round 2. I don't think he's fallen. Somebody might want to put a round 3, round 4 grade on him, and that's fair. He's a better prospect than Malik Willis was, who went in the end of the 3rd round. Team's going to take him before that. I don't see any scenario where he's not a 2nd round pick. Somebody's going to buy those traits, the elite level traits. Plus, he does have the arm talent to push the ball vertically down the field. The arm talent to push it vertically down the field and the rare athleticism, speed, mobility, game-breaking plays with his legs. Someone's going to invest him in the 2nd round. So while it was stock down for this week in Mobile, I think his overall draft stock is really not going to change all that much from what we saw here. If we take this to the next big name that was there was Dillon Gabriel. I will say this about Dillon Gabriel. I thought the arm talent was a little bit better than maybe we thought. So I think where it sometimes came across as below average arm talent with the undersized aspect of his game was an area where maybe round 6, round 7 UDFA at one point. But the athleticism, mobility, and I think the arm talent is functional. I don't think it's maybe it's bordering on average, slightly below, but it's not such a detriment. I thought he came across well in terms of maybe what the expectations were for him in terms of his arm talent. So I do think he's an interesting guy. We know he's played a lot of experience, sees things well on the football field. So I came away saying slightly stock up on Dillon Gabriel because I thought the arm talent was a little bit better than I anticipated. So I could see a team in that round 4, round 5 range, maybe looking at a guy like Dillon Gabriel who's played a lot of football, and you look at him and it's we can develop him into a solid backup. And if he's got to play, he's got a lot of experience under his belt. He can come in and keep the offense moving. I've heard people say, oh, Miami would be a great fit. He's a lefty, backs up Tua, doesn't change things in terms of some of the protection issues, the blind side, stuff like that. It kind of makes a lot of sense, to be frankly honest with you, but it's not the only place. There's other places I think he can go be a backup in a Shanahan scheme or, and back up Brock Purdy or other systems that are out there. So I think Gabriel has put himself in that, QB 6-ish, QB 7 range in this draft class, somewhere in that round 4, round 5. Could he fall to round 6? Possibly. But I do think him showing off a little bit more arm talent, I think probably helped him out a little bit at the Senior Bowl. A guy who I will say stock up on a little bit was Tyler Show out of Louisville. I know the age is a concern. I think he's going to be 25 when he gets drafted, but he looked pretty good out there. Great size and frame, athleticism and mobility, I would say, is just average, but he's got good to very good arm talent. He can make every throw. He's got good accuracy. He can push the ball vertically and outside the numbers. He probably, in terms of the whole package, probably looked better in practice than any of the other quarterbacks in terms of just throwing of the football. So I think it's definitely a little bit of a stock up for Tyler Show. I know Dane Brugler said there's some teams that are intrigued with him. Could he be a guy that surprises and maybe he's a top 100 pick? Could he be a guy that could be in the mix to be QB4 or QB5? I'm not there with him on that. But when a guy like Dane Brugler mentions as a possibility, my ears perk up a little bit. So I think it's definitely stock up on Tyler Show from his performance down there at the Senior Bowl. I'd say Riley Leonard is about stock neutral. I think he's around 5 to 7 type quarterback prospect. He's got the size, he's got the frame, he's got the athleticism. I think the arm talent is just average. Played a lot of football in college, so I think that'll intrigue to some teams. He's seen a lot. He's played in different offenses, the Duke offense, the Notre Dame offense. He's got some touch and, as a vertical passer. He's a good mental processor. But the physical traits, besides the athleticism, are lacking. And I think he's a guy that's more of a third string type developmental quarterback at the next level. But some teams could look at him and see a little bit more. So I would say stock neutral on him. I'd say about stock neutral on Seth Hennigan as well. Didn't really come across as a guy who, was stock up or stock down. So I think he's a late round UDFA type prospect in terms of the 2025 NFL draft. If we take this to the running back position, talk about some guys from the running back position, I would say RJ Harvey, I would say about stock neutral. He came into the week as a guy who was generating day two buzz. I don't think anything that he did this week really stood out in terms of, increasing his draft stock to be like a top 50 player. I don't think anything he did dropped him out of the top 100. I think he's a guy who, with that athleticism, pass catching ability, and other stuff, is going to be a guy that intrigues teams at the next level, versatile piece that can do a lot for an offense and add a different dynamic. So I'd say stock neutral on RJ Harvey. I would say stock up on Devin Neal. I know he's been one of my guys, but I thought he was generating a lot of buzz down there in Mobile. I thought he really looked good in some of the practice stuff. I thought he had some nice runs in the game. So that athleticism, stop-start acceleration, I think you see it, the change of direction, the agility. I love the footwork. He's a bigger guy at like 215, 220, and the way he moves is like a much smaller back. So I think he's now put himself squarely in the mix to be a top 100 player, somewhere maybe in the back half of round 3. And I think before this week, I thought maybe he was a definitive early day 3 guy. So I think he might have helped himself and maybe pushed his way into the top 100 mix as well. Couple smaller school guys that I thought stock up on. Marcus Yarns out of Delaware. Good athleticism, quickness, agility, really good receiving skills. So I thought he was a guy that maybe came into the week as a guy that was like 7th round priority free agent. Maybe now a team looking for a pass catching type guy. Maybe he can sneak his way into like round 6 because of that aspect of his game, or he could be a weapon in terms of his pass receiving skills. So I thought that was it. Another guy who I think is going to be climbing up the boards, stock up on Rashard Smith out of SMU. You can make the former wide receiver. So we saw this last year with Tyrone Tracy. I think you're going to see a lot of stock up on Rashard Smith over the next couple months. Good athleticism, quickness, burst, acceleration. You see those former wide receiver skills when he's running routes. You see the vision and the agility, the change of direction and elusiveness in the open field. I like the footwork. I think he's best in an outside zone run scheme. You want him in space. He's most comfortable in space, especially with that wide receiver background. So I think it's stock up on him. I think it's stock up on LaQuinton Allen out of Syracuse. Another really good pass catching. These all-star games really cater to the pass catchers in terms of how they look. So I think LaQuinton Allen, Marcus Yarns, Rashard Smith, all of those guys are weapons in the pass game that I think now all of those guys could go higher than the consensus was going into Mobile before the Senior Bowl. I would say stock neutral on Ollie Gordon and Damian Martinez. I have them in that like round 3-ish range, maybe round 4. So they're on that round 3, round 4 border. I don't think anything they did this week pushed them into the round 2 mix. I don't think anything this week pushed them out of that round 4 consideration. Obviously, they're both bigger backs. So that it was interesting that Damian Martinez came in a little bit smaller than maybe what his listed weight was. And he said he never really played at that large of a weight, which I think that's good for him. Ollie Gordon, obviously coming off a really poor year, but the year before was excellent. So I think both of those guys, I thought Ollie Gordon looked pretty good running in the game. I thought Martinez had his moments during the practice highlights and the practice film. Both of those guys, big, tough, physical, can carry a heavy workload, inside runners. I would say stock neutral on both of them. I'm going to say Donovan Edwards, stock down as a runner, stock up as a receiver. I think it's clear that Donovan Edwards has to be a guy who's a pass catching back, satellite player. You saw his natural route running. You saw his ability to create space as a receiver. I think Donovan Edwards is going to be a really interesting piece as a guy who gets drafted somewhere in round 4 to 6. and the team's going to look at him very much as a pass-catching weapon, few runs here or there, but more of a manufactured touch, offensive weapon type player. And I think that suits Donovan Edwards' skill set a lot more than traditional running back. So stock down as a runner, stock up as a passer, as a pass receiver for Donovan Edwards. I would say stock neutral on Woody Marks. I didn't see much of him in practice, but he's another guy who I think round 3, team's going to look at his versatility. People are going to look at how successful Bucky Irving was this year, and I think they could see very similar and have similar thoughts on a prospect like Woody Marks. So I thought he came out of this probably still holding his own as that round 3, round 4 pick. The last running back I want to bring up was Trevor Etienne. I think stock up on Etienne. I thought he looked really explosive in the practices, sharp cuts, start acceleration, the change of direction stuff, the footwork, really impressive from Trevor Etienne. The loaded running back class, right? So you could say, guys, a top 10, top 12, and in a normal year, that would be kind of like a little disrespectful. Not in this draft class. You could be a top 12 guy, but that still has a round 3, round 4 grade on you. Other years, you could be the 12th running back, and it could be like round 7 grade. So it's just a different dynamic this year with how strong of a class it was. But I thought it was definitely a good performance from Trevor Etienne this past week. So I will say stock up on Trevor Etienne. Let's take this to the pass catchers. Let's start with the tight ends because I think there's a lot to talk about there with the tight ends. We had stock up on a couple guys. We had some stock down, stock neutrals. But let's start with the 2 big stock ups at the tight end position. And that is arguably the guy who might have elevated his stock the most in this past week in Mobile was Miami's Elijah Arroyo. I loved him already. He was already my tight end 4 coming into the week. He's still at tight end 4, but that's only because I love tight end 3 also. But I think Arroyo has put himself now in the consideration to be a late round 1, early round 2 pick, especially if the medicals check out. His size, he came in at 250. So what was a concern about his frame when he was listed at like 235, when he comes in at 250, that answers some of that a little bit if people thought he was smaller. So he came in at a good size in terms of his frame. He's got very good top-end athleticism, speed, movement skills. He can attack the seam. He can get vertical. He can pick up yards after the catch. He's one of those mismatch nightmares. But coming in at the weight he did, if he can play a little bit in line, got to know who he is. Don't try to make him more in line like the Giants did with Evan Ingram at times. But the way the Jaguars use a guy like Evan Ingram, it's how a team's got to deploy Elijah Arroyo at the next level. But I think stock squarely up on Elijah Arroyo. I'll say stock up on Mason Taylor. If anybody had any concerns about Mason Taylor and why he should be tight end 3 or tight end 4 in this class, I think he put them to rest this week down there. He showed the complete package, the athleticism, the speed, the movement skills, the body control, and the ball skills. He's tough. He's tenacious. He's got good blocking skills. There's a lot to like about Mason Taylor. I think he's, after Tyler Warren, maybe the most complete tight end in terms of balance, in terms of his receiving skills, his blocking skills. A lot to like about Mason Taylor. Obviously, he's got the bloodline. His dad is Jason Taylor, the great pass rusher. So I think Taylor and Arroyo are going to be in a battle to be tight end 3 and tight end 4. If the medicals check out on Arroyo and you want just that dynamic pass catcher, I think Arroyo could go 3rd. Right now, with the medicals and with the completeness of Mason Taylor, who's also a very good receiver in his own right, I have Taylor slightly ahead of Arroyo. That's something that I'll probably wrestle with as I head towards my tier buster shows after the combine, in a month or so. I think that's going to be a coin flip there for my tight end 3 spot between Arroyo and Mason Taylor, but stock up for both of those guys. I'm going to say a little bit of a stock down on Harold Fannin Jr. out of Bowling Green. Listen, the production this past year in college is, it's unprecedented. 117 catches, over 1,500 yards. But he's a little undersized at 6'4", 230. He's a pass-catching tight end. He's not going to hold up much blocking. I just have my concerns about the athleticism. When I watch him on the practice field, there's this aspects of his game where I don't know if he's going to be able to create as much separation at the next level. He's going to have to really be savvy in terms of his route running, creating late separation. He's not on the same level athleticism as a Mason Taylor or an Elijah Arroyo. I think any thought of Harold Fannin Jr. being tight end 3 in this class is long gone. I think now we have the round 1 guys in Warren and Colson Loveland. We have the guys who were late round 1 to mid round 2, I think, in Elijah Arroyo and Mason Taylor. And then to me, there's another tier break. And then maybe Fannin is in that next tier, maybe round 3. What I saw, if I was advising him, I wouldn't have him run the 40 ever. I wouldn't have him run the 40. If he can't do the jumps well, I would just only have him run drills at the combine and his pro day. I'm not sure he's going to be able to get away with that. But to me, if he tests really, really poorly for a small school prospect at a Bowling Green, it's going to devastate his draft stock. Not running the 40 at all might hurt his draft stock a little bit, but people could still fall back on that amazing production and still maybe take him in round 3, round 4. If he bombs the combine or his pro day with his 40 time, you're going to see him plummet to late day 3. And I don't think that's where he should go. I think he's a round 3, round 4 guy. But I didn't see a guy who I think is going to run a good 40 time. And especially relative to what we're going to see Warren and Loveland and, Jake Brinstool at a Clemson, and we're going to see Mason Taylor and these other guys are going to run these really impressive 40 times relative for the position. I don't think we're going to see that for Harold Fannin. His movement is a little like, a little segmented and rigid, not very smooth in terms of his movement skills. I didn't see a guy who's going to be a game-breaking pass-catching tight end at the next level. I know his college film showed that, but that level of competition is very different than what we saw at Senior Bowl, and it'll be very different than what we see at the next level. So for me, unfortunately, stock down a little bit on Harold Fannin Jr. I think he's now clearly in that tier 3 group of tight ends. With him there, I have Gunnar Helm. I like Gunnar Helm's game. This week, I would say he's probably about stock neutral. I didn't think he really stood out in any way in terms of what we saw. I think he's probably in that mix right there to be a guy who in that round 3 border, but not at the level of Arroyo and Mason Taylor, who I talked about before. I think Terrence Ferguson had a pretty good week. So I'm going to say stock up on Terrence Ferguson. I do think he's like a round 4, round 5 prospect, but I did think he showed himself well in terms of his pass catching upside that we know he has. Maybe the athleticism, the movement skills were a little bit better. So I would say stock up on Ferguson from what I saw from the practices down there. I think Thomas Fedone out of Nebraska, a little stock up on him. Maybe went in there only as a blocking, but I thought he held his own in terms of the pass catching aspects. So a guy who maybe could be in that round 6, round 7 border, but maybe not looked at as solely as a blocker, but maybe also a guy who could help out a little bit in terms of his pass catching upside as well. Let's take this to the receivers and talk about there. Now, overall, it was definitely more of a lackluster wide receiver group down there in Mobile compared to what we've seen in the past. So a couple of things that stood out, a couple of the big names that I want to talk about. Obviously, let's start with the Iowa State guys. They were 2 of the big names down there. Jalen Knoll has garnered as much of attention as his teammate, Jaden Higgins. But I think Jalen Knoll down there was the better of the 2 players. Yeah, he's a little undersized, frame is average, but the athleticism, speed, the movement skills, the short area and separation quickness, he showed he can win in a variety of ways down there. And I think that's the key. He came across as more than just a possession slot guy. He's a guy who can maybe use as a vertical slot, can be used on manufactured touches. He was winning a little bit on the outside. So I think Jalen Knowles put himself now in position to maybe be a guy that was a day 3 guy to maybe now be a day 2 guy. So he might be a guy that we were sleeping on a little bit. The league probably had a higher grade on him than maybe Draft Twitter did going into the week. So he might have went from a guy who was like, round 5 to now maybe a guy who's in that round 3 mix for the performance that he had there. I think he kind of awoken some people in terms of what we thought of him, sending us back to the film. It was a big week for Jalen Knoll. His teammate, Jaden Higgins, it was kind of an up and down week. I thought the early practice reps that I saw of him, he was struggling to create separation. He had some better reps as the week went on. But I think you got to know who Jaden Higgins is. He's not going to be a guy who wins with the releases and the separation quickness. He's going to create late separation. He's got great ball skills. He's got great body control. I mentioned, I think on the preview show, that my ears perked up when I saw him in round 2 of Dane Brugler's mock before the Senior Bowl. To me, that tells me if Dane's got him that high in a mock, I think there's a lot of consensus that he's looked at as a rock solid day 2 prospect. So now maybe things can change in the pre-draft months, but I think at this point, we're probably going to see both Iowa State receivers go in the first couple rounds of the NFL draft. So I'll say stock up on Jalen Noel. I'll say stock neutral on Jane Higgins. I don't think he hurt his value or helped his value. I think he kind of has held firm there. I will say stock slightly down on Pat Bryant. I thought he had some separation concerns on some of the reps I saw. Obviously, I'm not privy to all the reps, so it's limited in what I'm seeing. But from what I was able to see, again, I like Pat Bryant. I like the ball skills, the catch radius, winning contested catches. But I thought on some of the reps, creating that separation was an area that I was a little bit concerned for. The overall route running, the long speed and that separation quickness. I think that kind of showed a little bit on the reps that I was able to see of Pat Bryant. So I'll say stock slightly down on him. I would say stock neutral on Ty Felton. I was kind of hoping that he had like a monster week and was like considered one of the winners of the week. But I do think, what Felton brings to the table in terms of that raw speed, he might be a guy we're talking a lot about after the combine as a combine winner, and then send people back to the film. And I think they'll come away a little bit more impressed with Ty Felton if they haven't really studied him closely yet. Xavier Restrepo, the slot receiver out of Miami, I would say probably stock neutral. I think a team's going to draft him somewhere in round 3 because he could be a prolific slot receiver at the next level. I think you saw some of that separation quickness when he was inside. I think it was the first day they were asking him to run some routes on the outside, and that's not his area of strength. And he kind of struggled in that regard in terms of creating separation on the outside. I think he needs a space in the middle of the field, kind of where he does his best. So I would say stock about neutral on Restrepo. I still think he's ticketed for, round 3. Stock up on Tej Johnson. Every rep that I saw him, he was creating insane amount of separation, the footwork, the change of direction, the speed, the releases. Listen, there's going to be play strength concerns. There's going to be size concerns, but we saw Tank Dell really make an impact in his rookie year. This year was a little bit up and down, and then before the injury. But Tej Johnson, I think, has got a real chance to go round 2. It's not a great wide receiver year. I've said it for months. If Wan'Dale Robinson can go in round 2, Tej Johnson can go in round 2. A team's going to fall in love with what Tej Johnson can bring to the table at the next level. So I would say stock up on him. I would say about stock neutral on Jalen Royals. I was hoping he had a big-time week that kind of solidified his day 2 status. I still think he's a day 2 type wide receiver, but it wasn't a overly impressive week. I thought it was he did what he needed to do. He showed some of his skills that I think we know he has. I was kind of hoping in this setting where he was the guy that we came away talking about after every practice, similar to Tej Johnson, and really elevate himself for a rock solid round 2 or day 2 pick. I still think he's got a real chance to go on day 2, probably more round 3 than round 2. There also could be a scenario where he falls to the top of round 4. I don't think that's crazy. So I would say probably about stock neutral on Jalen Royals. And then I saved the best for last in terms of the wide receiver position. Stock way, way up on Jack Bash out of TCU. He's a guy that, again, why I love the Senior Bowl, had some watched film on him, but now the Senior Bowl, right after the first day of practice, before the next day even came around, I had to go find more film on him because that's how impressive he was. The size, the frame is good. The athleticism is good. The body control, the ball skills, that play strength, the toughness, the physicality, the way he wins contested catches, the way he uses his physicality to create late separation, really good, clean footwork, good route running. He's a tough blocker. There's a lot to like. So to me, you can make the case that he was the biggest winner of the whole week. And it's great that he scored the game-winning touchdown to end the game, because he went from a guy who I think for most people was probably a round 4, round 5 type pick to a guy now that I don't think gets out of day 2, because everyone's looking for a tough, physical, good route runner, receiver. You plug him in, he's going to be a great number 2 or number 3 for a team. He brings toughness, he brings physicality, he blocks, he can win inside, he can win outside. He's not going to be a traditional X or something like that, but know who he is. There was tons of Puka Nacua comps during the week. I think that's partly because of the route running, the toughness, the physicality, all things that we know Puka Nacua does really well. But stock up on Jack Bash probably more than any other player down there in Mobile. If we quickly scan my notes here, some other guys that I thought stood out. The defensive back that impressed me the most in all the film watching was Quincy Riley. I thought he did a really good job in one-on-ones, which it's already mostly skewed to the receiver. So I thought Quincy Riley had a decent amount of pass breaks up, a good amount of coverage that I thought was really impressive. So I thought Quincy Riley was the best defensive back that I saw in terms of the practice film that was out there. If we take this to the D line, obviously a absolutely loaded D line group. Mike Green out of Marshall. Obviously, everyone sees that one play where he just blew up the offensive lineman. I think that was on day 2. But Mike Green was consistently disruptive, showing off his skill set that makes him and has him as a first-round pick. I thought Deion Walker out of Kentucky showed his freakiness in terms of the size, athleticism components, or that he looked good this week. Obviously, Walter Nolan, checking off boxes in terms of being a high pick at the next level. Other guys here, just so many. Obviously, Shamar Stewart, I know he didn't play in the game, but I think it was the first 2 practices. He showed why he's going to be a top 20 pick in the NFL draft as well. So another guy that stood out there on this loaded D-line group. In terms of the linebacker group, just kind of looking through here, see if anybody kind of stuck out. I don't think any of the linebackers that I would say definitely like dramatically elevated their stock. I think most of them kind of stock neutral in terms of the linebackers. If we take this to the offensive linemen, let's see who I thought maybe had the best performance for the week. Obviously, North Dakota State's Gray Zabel was the biggest winner, a guy who was looked at as maybe a top 50 pick going into the week. I don't see a scenario now where he's not locked into the 20 to 32 range. I think he's going to play inside the next level, center or guard. I think he can be a good starter at either one of them. I think he elevated his stock the most from any of the offensive linemen down there. So those are just a couple other players that I thought really shined this week from some of the other position groups, not on the offensive skill. If we take this for a little recap in terms of the Shrine Bowl, in terms of some of the players that I thought stood out over there, at the running back position, I was really impressed from the highlights of the week of practice and then the game. Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, the backstory is fascinating. Obviously, only played one game at Arizona, 4 years at Alabama State, transfers to New Mexico, 1,100 yards, 17 touchdowns there, but then only one game due to eligibility issues at Arizona. To me, the quickness, the athleticism, the agility, I kind of put Krosky Merritt on that group of stock up guys, similar to the Senior Bowl, the smaller guys, the Brashard Smith, the Marcus Yarns. I think Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt is right there with those guys in terms of checking the first box in the pre-draft process. He's going to be at the combine, I have very little doubt. Great week of practice for Krosky Merritt. Great game. He's put himself now, I think, in the mix to be in that round 5, round 6 range in a star-studded running back class. So I thought he looked really good in the game and the practices. He stood out. At the tight end position, I thought Jalen Conyers out of Texas Tech, very versatile tight end, 6'3", 263, but he's got pass catching skills. Probably going to be looked at as like an H-back, but he can line up in line. He can line up detach. You can put him in motion. You can do a lot of different things with him. I thought he's a guy to maybe help his stock a little bit that versatility could put him in the mix there somewhere in that round 5, round 6 range as well. Other guys on the wide receiver position, I think the Jackson Meeks out of Syracuse, the former big-time recruit from Georgia. Week of practice was good. The ball skills, the body control, the ability to high point and adjust to win contested catches. I think stock up on Jackson Meeks. Nick Nash, I think there was more hope that he was going to look a little bit more natural and fluid. Obviously, the former quarterback put up gaudy stats this year, but I'll say a little bit of a stock down for Nick Nash. We'll see how the rest of the pre-draft process goes. Hopefully, he runs okay so that doesn't, completely hurt his draft stock. Obviously, the production he had this past year was outstanding. We'd like to kind of see him build on that. I didn't think it was a great week for him at the Shrine Bowl. Some receivers who I thought did look really good. Ricky White out of UNLV, who's I think one of the stars of the practice highlights. Athleticism, speed, burst, acceleration, the footwork, the route running chops, in and out of his breaks, was really a tough cover all week there. So I think stock up on Ricky White. Stock up on Eastern Washington's Efton Chisholm III. He's a slot-only guy, but very quick, good footwork, that separation quickness that you love to see, good hands. Definitely put himself on the map to be a guy that could be drafted somewhere in that round 6, round 7 range. Yet all the Colorado receivers down there, I thought in the game, Will Shepard showed his body control and ball skills. Obviously, of the guys who were there, Shepard put up the least amount of production this year. After LeJohntay Webster was obviously the second guy there for Colorado, after Travis Hunter, and then it was Will Shepard and Jimmy Horn. But Will Shepard in the game showed really good body control and ball skills to make a couple adjustments. It was a nice play or two by him in the game. I think that's kind of his calling card. So it's going to be really interesting. Some of these Colorado receivers. Does a team who drafts Shadu Sanders in the first round, maybe late round, priority free agent, so they bring in one or two of his Colorado guys, kind of just give him somebody that he's got a rapport with a little bit there, especially as he works his way up. Obviously most of these rookie quarterbacks start third string or second string, working their way up, where it'll be a little bit of a comfort level, rookie mini camp, stuff like that. So I think these Colorado guys, that was the rumor that Shadu Sanders agreed to go to the Shrine Bowl if the Colorado guys there. So you love the leadership there from Sanders in terms of helping his guys out, get invited to one of these pre-draft all-star games that I think helps elevate people's stock. So I thought it was a good opportunity for some of these guys there. So there it is, guys. My quick thoughts on the Shrine Bowl and then a lot more detailed analysis there on the Senior Bowl. If you're enjoying this coverage, guys, please get over to the website, SS Football. Fastest and easiest way to get there for $9.99. Check out all of our premium content. You get the scouting notebook. It has almost 100 detailed player profile, strengths, functional areas, developmental areas, how they win, NFL role, fantasy spin. I separated it now, so there's tabs for just the players who have declared for the draft. All my reports for the guys who didn't declare are still there as well, but on separate tabs. I have spots for 20 new profiles to be added. So those will be coming out probably prior to the combine or right around the combine as I do some more deep film watching before I feel comfortable putting a whole full analysis on those. You get the rankings notebook. It has all our detailed rankings, draft rankings, Devy rankings, positional dynasty rankings, dynasty rookie rankings. It'll have our tiered rankings before the draft, and then it'll have our next wave of dynasty rookie rankings. And then in April, the draft projections notebook, tabs, every position, offense and defense, 400 players or so in this, snapshot of how they win, their measurements, their combine testing, ranked in how we expect them to come off the board, not from my opinion, but from everything we're hearing, reading, listening from the best in the industry. We want to be your guide on draft weekend. We've had tremendous amount of success predicting the prospects to come off at the right time. We have a tab projecting the 32 prospects to come off the board in round 1, a tab projecting the top 100. We did really well last year, first time finally entering the huddle contest. We did a really good job in that last year. Look forward to hopefully getting back into that. And then a tab trying to project every player taken in all 7 rounds. That is released in April. It's $9.99. It's the lifeblood of what we do here. Without people purchasing that, we would not be able to exist and continue to bring you what we do here at Saturday to Sunday. So we hope if you bought it in the past, you consider purchasing it again. If you've never purchased it, we would love it if you just consider checking it out. $9.99. Every sale really does dramatically help us. Everything goes right back in to everything we need here at Saturday to Sunday. So on behalf of our sound tech engineer, David Nakano, and myself, thank you for joining us, and we look forward next time taking you from Saturday to Sunday.